It's this movie. This is this is the plot for a movie here. It's great. Hello, welcome to Financial Insider Weekly. I'm your host, Michael Gray, CPA. My guest today is Naomi Comfort. Naomi is an attorney with whom the law firm, Silicon Valley Elder Law, a professional corporation. She's taught continuing education courses on fiduciary income taxation and other subjects for CPAs, attorneys, and the public. And Naomi and I have also done seminars together, and she's been a guest on the show several times before. So welcome back again, Naomi. Glad to have you here again.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Today we're going to be talking about issues related to retirement and long-term care planning, more or less from the perspective of the elder law attorney. And before we get started, I just want to caution our viewers that we're just covering some highlights of complex legal areas. This is something that you really need to get together with your attorney and hopefully even a CPA or other financial advisors. Make sure you have the whole story related to your own situation. But we're hoping that we'll bring up some issues for you to think about and then take to your advisors. Okay, Naomi, let's get started here. I guess every once in a while you get together with a client, they're trying to do some retirement planning, and they say, will I have enough money? So then what do you say?
I get that question all the time. And really the answer of whether their money is enough money depends on what they are hoping to do with their resources and whether they are wanting to be able to live off of the income that's generated by the principal and be able to preserve that nest egg to pass on to somebody else, or whether they're just looking for enough resources to be able to pay for their costs of care and maintain some kind of standard of living through their retirement years so that they don't end up on public assistance in the end. But I keep a crystal ball at my office for just these types of questions because, of course, I don't have the answers as to is that enough. I don't know what's going to happen with each person in the future and with the economy and with the politics and with insurance. So we have to take a lot of different things into consideration as we're looking at long-term care planning and retirement planning for our elders.
So there are a lot of unknowns, things to think about. So one is life expectancy, and so life expectancy is getting longer and longer. I believe I saw someplace, but just to say it's close enough. The life expectancy for a married couple age 65, I believe, is 35 years. That's a long time.
That's a long time for your retirement assets to last.
Yeah.
And basically, you may have worked for 35 or 40 years to try to accumulate enough that's now going to last you for another 35 or 40 years. We're not just talking about 5 or 10 years that people are planning for their period of life where they're not working and where they may need assistance. So it's quite a significant portion of many people's lives.
Right. Now, related to this, Social Security is really important. It's an important part for most people's retirement planning. And so these are things, maybe even a little beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but when you're getting together with people and talking about financial planning and so forth, you'll want to look at how do Social Security benefits work. And part of what's going on because of the longer life expectancies, for example, I'm in that generation or that group that the retirement age has been stretched out a little bit. So my normal retirement age is going to be 66, where for most people it's been 65. And then also, if you can hold out a little bit, you get a little boost related to the benefit that you get. So some people are deciding to wait to retire a little bit, so they'll get some more
get a
Social
higher
Security
payment
Yeah,
for
get a
their
higher
Social
payment.
Security. Exactly.
And
And
that
then there's
can
people like me who won't have Social Security potentially to rely on when we retire.
I think it's going to be there, but anyway, but yeah, it is, it is a concern, and the reliability of the Social Security system, it plays an important part in retirement for the American public, and so we need to just bear that in mind, and we all should be concerned.
It
All
is
right.
a very big
Yeah.
and important part, and I think that with the disruptions we've seen in the economy in the past handful of years, it's really turned people's financial planning upside down, particularly my clients who are at or close to retirement, because they've already put in their years, they've had a plan, they've been building, and all of a sudden as they're approaching those last few working years, they see everything just wiped out in front of them. They see the equity in their home that they watched grow and grow and grow and grow just be decimated, and many times they're counting on that equity as a source for paying for long-term care costs or as a source for buying into a long-term care continuing care retirement community. And so when that equity gets wiped out, it leaves them quite vulnerable as to what is their next plan. Other people I've had with investments in their 401ks, and they're maybe living off of their Social Security and required minimum distributions. Well, when the values on the assets in the retirement accounts dropped, their required minimum distribution dropped, and if they were living off of the required minimum distribution, they would have had to dip into additional principal in order to maintain the standard of living, so that even if they maintained the rest of the assets in the retirement account, as the values came back up, which they did for those of us who stayed in, those of you who stayed in the market, they lost out on a lot of that because they had to cash in parts of their investments, and so they lost out there. And then you have all the people who are employed in the private sector. We're seeing it certainly here in San Jose quite a bit, where a lot of our public sector is choosing to retire early because they're seeing their pensions being reduced in the future, and their pensions are based on their current earnings. And so if their salaries keep getting cut, as they have been because of the economic situation, then their pension going forward gets cut, and the amounts they're having to contribute into the pension are increasing. And so it's really changed the economics for them. And I've known quite a few people in their mid to late 50s who've actually elected to retire now because they think they're going to be better off than if they stayed until they were 65. So these changing financial times have really impacted people's long-term plans for moving forward.
Yeah. By the way, the situation isn't really totally new. So, for example, when my father-in-law was planning his retirement, he was working for the Department of the Navy, and he was seeing the pension benefits even cut back then. This was many years ago.
Right.
And so he decided to retire earlier. And actually, it ended up working out very well for him. They have nice cost of living increases, and he had his medical coverage, so in his particular case, he had a very good retirement.
Yeah, we've been really blessed in this country to have several decades of we've had our ups and downs, but mostly it's just been up and up and up and up, and we've had the growth and we've had the sustained economies, so that people got lulled into this sense of, you just keep putting away, and you just keep doing the right thing and you're going to get there. And, for some people that's still true, but for really quite a few others, those opportunities, it's just a matter of luck, really.
Yeah.
They lost those opportunities, and now they're scrambling for how they will maintain themselves during their retirement.
Right. So, yeah, it's made it harder, and we're going to need to move on to some of these other points, but I guess I'll just sort of throw this last thing in, and that's it. You have to be careful when you're dealing with the assets. We've talked about this in other interviews, so you can look at some of them that I've done with Craig Martin and so forth, where we've talked about that you've got to emotionally or detach yourself emotionally to some degree from your investments to sit tight to this. Like you said, there are a lot of people that bailed out when the market went down, and some of them still haven't gotten back in.
And they've lost out on the gain.
And meanwhile, we've had a huge recovery, and so those things tend to follow when you've got a market decline. Anyway, well, here we are. You have to deal with reality as it is for you now. All right. So, okay, so we've actually covered a lot of these issues related to economic disruptions. I think another thing, though, that maybe we'll bring up related to this, and it's something that hasn't been with us that much the last several years, that we've been very fortunate, I guess, but that's inflation. And so it's another big concern.
Yeah, it is.
Because inflation is what we call the hidden tax on the elderly or the retired, because the government is, in a sense, getting some sort of value or whatever out, and meanwhile the value of your assets are declining, and so now you can't live off of what you thought you could before.
Right, and that doesn't even take into consideration the astronomical increases in the costs of care when you're starting to have some medical problems. And as you mentioned, people are living so much longer, but they're also living with these debilitating and expensive medical conditions much longer.
Okay, so let's get more into some of the long-term care planning and so forth. So what about these continuing care retirement communities? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about them. Are they a good option for some people?
They are a good option for some people. As I'm meeting with clients and we're putting together an estate plan, as an elder law attorney, I'm not just looking at where are your assets going to go after you pass away, who's going to be the beneficiary of the remaining assets. But we're really focused on how are we going to get you through those last years, how are we going to pay for the costs of care, and what type of care are you looking for? What are your goals? Are we trying to keep you at home as long as possible? Do you want to be in a community environment? Do we need to get you into a nursing home? These continuing care communities, they have some real benefits. If the elder is at all social, they tend to be great because it gives them that social life. Without it, a lot of our elders, their lives shrink each year. Their social circle gets smaller as they're involved in fewer and fewer activities, and they're losing their independence, and their friends have passed on, and their family members have passed on. And so their circles get smaller and smaller, and they get vulnerable when they're in that position. And they get depressed when they're in that position. So for many people, these communities are a great resource because they have all sorts of activities to keep you involved in the community, to keep your mind stimulated, to keep you physically active. You've really got a community of people looking out for you. Certain types of people don't do well in these types of environments. I have some clients who are real loners who really don't want to be around other people much. Or I know they're not going to get engaged in those activities even if there's opportunity there all the time. So for them, it's not a good choice. Some of the issues with these communities, they take you in and you pay a huge fee for the privilege of them guaranteeing that they will care for you no matter what happens. And so you pay this big fee up front, so it costs a lot to get in. Then you also have a monthly rental that you pay, and you also pay for additional services that are provided to you. But usually part of that contract is when you go in, if you run out of funds, they will continue to pay for you because they've got this charitable arm for most of them that they've built up. So there's a great security in that, particularly for people who don't have a good network of people to rely on, or their children maybe live across the country, not nearby or not available to really check in on them. It's a real comfort really for the whole family to know that somebody's kind of looking after mom and dad, and they're not isolated. If something goes wrong, there's somebody right there. So they are good in that sense, but they're very expensive to get into, and you have to start looking, one, while you're healthy, or healthy enough that they'll accept you, and two, while you still have resources, because you can't get into these places if you've already, if you stayed at home as long as you could and you're out of money and now you're looking to move, you're going to be at a real disadvantage of trying to move into one of these communities, because you do need this huge layout of principle to get in.
Yeah. Now, related to this, I guess I'll just throw out that, I mean, I hate to say it pays to do shopping, but in a sense, different care centers or whatever, or different alternatives offer different things.
Correct.
And so I had a situation. I was the trustee for my brother-in-law's mother, and she stayed, I guess you could say it was a group care center for people with dementia, Alzheimer's. So she was there for a while, but then according to their rules, when she couldn't find her way out, if there was an emergency, then we had to find an alternative for her. So then we ended up getting her in a smaller home where she could get a little more individual care. On the other hand, and I mean, it was okay, it worked out, and the best thing was that the person that was running it was just very good at providing care.
Right. Right.
Now,
and sometimes these smaller homes are just wonderful. They maybe have 10, 12 residents, and it's more of a family environment, and they're very invested in the individual clients, but they also can't take every kind of client, and you really have to do your research, because they're not regulated the way the nursing homes and the continuing care communities are. There's much more lax regulations, and so
I'd say get references. I think is an important thing, or if you know the people that are involved. I was just fortunate I got a good reference in this particular case. Now, in contrast, my father-in-law developed Alzheimer's, and he had said before, just basically, take me in the back and shoot me. It wasn't really quite that. It was more like take me to Oregon and let them, euthanize me, whatever. But he did get to a point where finally he said, I think we need to look around for a place. We were so fortunate with him. And so anyway, but we got a reference from, believe it or not, it was from the Alzheimer's doctor's receptionist or nurse. And she said, I have a relative that's in this particular center, and it's worked out just great. Go and check it out. So my daughter took them to a number of places, most of which they did not like, but then they saw this place and thought, this looks interesting, because like you said, the way it was structured was that it was very social. The residents were not allowed to have a television in their room. They were not put in a wheelchair, or allowed to sit in a wheelchair outside their room. They were brought into a community room, and then they did activities together, and they had dancing and bingo and other things that were going on to keep them engaged. And even if they weren't so engaged, there was engaged things that was going on around them.
Exactly.
And so, and they had wonderful people that worked there, and so the young women that would work there would, rub them or hug them on it or whatever, so that they had that, social contact. And anyway, my father-in-law just blossomed. He just loved this, and so it ended up being just great. And so his final years were pretty happy ones in this center.
Right. Right. We see so many different things, and each situation is going to be a bit different. But, for years and years and years, all I heard from clients is, no matter what, I don't want to go to a nursing home. Don't send me to a nursing home. Don't send me to a nursing home.
Because they don't really know.
But they're not. They're not so institutionalized as they used to be. They're much nicer places. And at some point, people do want to stay in their own home, but at some point, it can become quite unsafe to try to maintain a frail, elderly person at home who's got medical conditions, who's got memory loss. It can become quite dangerous. And so those are the kinds of things that we talk through with the clients when they come in to meet with us, because they may come in with a very set idea that they are going to stay at home as long as possible. You know, husband's going to take care of wife till the very end, no matter what. But when reality sets in, there needs to be a backup plan to that, because so often that's not the way things go down at the last few months or the last year or so of somebody's life. It just gets to be too difficult and exhausting on the care providing spouse or the family members who are providing the care, and it's just too difficult to keep somebody safe. Also, if you're having a bunch of caregivers come into the home to take care of the elder, it ends up being more expensive to keep the person in the home than to have them go into a nursing home. So from an economic standpoint, it often is better for them to be in a nursing home to protect the assets from that expense and the exposure to liability of having somebody come in and out of the home. And also, our Medi-Cal system will pay for long-term care in a skilled nursing facility once you reach certain financial levels, and they almost don't pay for care at home. There is some funding for care at home, but very little compared to what's available for somebody who's in a nursing home.
Yeah, I had a situation with it's interesting how when you have these years of experience, you know, then you just run into things. But anyway, so I had this with a senior client who was quite wealthy, actually, and she insisted she wanted to stay at home. And so they had, I think, about 3 caregivers that were staying with her. And I was talking to the family, and they said, well, you know, we're concerned about her estate planning or whatever, or the assets. And I said, well, this problem is being taken care of because they're all being consumed for her care at home, you know, by her just, you know, making this choice of being there. That the choice is to consume a considerable amount of assets for the family.
Right.
And so...
and that's the choice that should be made by the elder, while the elder has capacity to make those decisions and to talk it through, hopefully, with the person who will be making decisions for them should they become incapacitated. When the elder has told the child, I want to stay at home, I want to stay at home, I want to stay at home, keep me at home until I die, don't let them put me in a nursing home, don't move me out of my home. And then it becomes either financially or physically untenable to maintain the elder in the home. The child who's having to make the decisions about what to do next is just riddled with guilt. It makes it very, very difficult for that person. So to have a chance to explore the parameters of, well, I know you want to stay home, but at what point should we look at moving you out? At what point is it okay for your children to consider this? Do you want to have some assets protected, do some Medi-Cal planning so that there's something left for the kids? Do you know, what if you are pushing to stay at home and something bad happens to you? Your kids are going to feel very guilty. How are we going to address that? How are we going to deal with it in advance? And that's what the elder law attorney is for that counseling and to help work through some of those issues, because we see them over and over again.
Yeah, we were so fortunate because, like in my father-in-law's circumstance, that he made all the good decisions, the right decisions, and so it made it so much easier for the family.
It does. It really makes a difference, and it makes a difference for the relationships going forward, both through the chronic illness or the terminal illness, the final phase of life, and for the relationships after the elder has passed away. Because if you've been able to work through those difficult issues together and you haven't blown up sibling or cousin relationships and rivalries, more likely they'll have those relationships going forward. And that's a real focus in my practice, is maintaining relationships.
Good. We only have about 4 minutes left, just to let you know. Maybe you can talk briefly about the role of reverse mortgages in this.
Oh, absolutely. Reverse mortgages can be very, very advantageous to certain individuals. They can also cause financial disasters. Where a reverse mortgage works is that the person needs care and is able to stay at home, and there's enough equity in the home that they can pull it out of a reverse mortgage and pay for the care at home until they pass away. So that requires having adequate equity in the home and having a medical condition or situation and a support network that allows the person to continue to stay at home. Where we run into trouble is that where the person takes out that reverse mortgage the moment they're old enough to qualify for the reverse mortgage, and instead of using it for costs of care, uses it to supplement their lifestyle and pay for things that they really couldn't afford. And then when it comes time to needing funds to pay for costs of care, they've already accessed the equity in their home. There is no more equity, and we're stuck. They need to either move into a nursing home to get the care they need, but if they do that, then the house gets sold, and the proceeds of the sale have to be spent down to qualify for Medi-Cal, right? Or they're going to stay at home but have no money to pay for the costs of care. So it gets people into quite a bind. They can be wonderful. I've seen them work out really well. I've also seen catastrophic results. And the counseling that goes into the reverse mortgage process is really, really important.
Right. So just be aware that with most reverse mortgages, if you're out of the home for a year or so, then basically the bank has the right to sell the home at that point. And so, since people may go into a care center, just be aware there's a good chance your home is going to be sold.
Right, and that all of the funds are going to be used to pay for your costs of care.
Okay, we only have maybe a minute and a half left, so maybe you can throw out a final thought and then we'll just wind this thing up.
A final thought. When I'm meeting with my clients and we're talking about long-term care and retirement, I always address the issue of Medi-Cal, which is our needs-based public assistance that covers the costs of long-term nursing care for somebody who can't afford it. There are certain assets that are exempt. You don't have to be completely impoverished to qualify for that care. It is critical that as part of the planning process with my elders, we talk through the different situations of how they would or not be willing to consider utilizing that public assistance in their circumstances. We can do a lot of asset protection planning if it's consistent with the goals of the client. And so it's one more element that we look at for the long-term care planning.
Okay. We're all out of time. We have done other programs on Medi-Cal planning. You can look at it under past episodes on Financial Insider Weekly. We'll probably be doing another update in that area. With that, though, we're all out of time. So we'll see you next time on Financial Insider Weekly.